Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. Today I have another book review for you, and that is for The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne. This is the second book in his Bloodsworn trilogy. Now, I read the first book, Shadow of the Gods, I think around 2 years ago, and I loved it. I had a great time with that book. It was one of my favorite books that I read back in 2023. And I have been wanting to pick the series back up ever since then, but I just had never gotten around to it. And I got book 2 for Christmas last year, and then like right after that, I had some gift cards to bookstores, and I went out and bought book 3 for myself. So I will be finishing up this trilogy, I think, this year. But read book 2 and really enjoyed it. I don't think I liked it quite as much as book 1. It's like just not quite there, but it was still really good. A lot of the stuff that was good about book 1, I think, was good about book 2. All that kind of thing. I think if you enjoyed the first one, you'll probably enjoy this one. So yeah. As far as things that I enjoyed about this book, though, a lot of it really is just very similar stuff to the first one. First of all, this series is the only thing by John Gwynne that I've read so far, so I am assuming this is the case in his other books, but the way that he writes action is fantastic. Some of the best action I've ever read, super, like, visceral and really strong imagery and all that kind of thing, just really gets across the feeling of, of fighting and battle and all that stuff. Really good action. And the prose in general of John Gwynne and these books I really like, which really adds a lot to the atmosphere of the books as well. These books, I think, are very atmospheric, really get across the sense of the setting of this kind of Nordic-inspired world, and I think his prose and the way that he writes these books specifically really get that across very well as well. I also enjoyed the story here. I liked the way that it expanded on the first book. First book, you kind of had like a few different plot lines following primarily 3 characters that kind of, come into this book, and it expands on them nicely. It adds in some new characters. It continues those stories in interesting ways, has them converging in some interesting ways, and expands the scope and scale of things in ways that I really enjoyed, bringing in much more the titular gods of this world, who are like actual characters within these books, who show up and do stuff, talk to the characters, travel with the characters, and they feel, I think, the way they should. Like, they feel like characters who are powerful, who are, demanding of this respect, and things like that. And it just brings the scale of the book up quite a bit in a way that I think does work really well. And in addition to that, just the scale in general, like the scale of the story also expands in terms of adding more POVs, in terms of adding more characters, in terms of just ramping up the stakes and everything, which is something that I also appreciate about this book. The first book, to me, like, it feels big in the sense that, like, it really has a strong sense of, like, setting. So, like, you can tell that the world has some depth to it, and things like that. And it got a decent sense of scale and scope, especially as the book goes on. Like, towards the end of the book, I think the scale really kind of gets going. But it is, I think, a much smaller feeling book than this one is. And this one really kind of brings things up, and enhances the stakes and things like that in a way that I think is very effective. The characters as well are really well done, especially in like the dialogue. Like I said, I really enjoyed the prose in these books, and a big part of that as well is the dialogue. The way that John Gwynne writes the dialogue in these books for these characters, first of all, just the word choice and things like that feels very authentic to kind of that Norse Viking-y kind of inspired culture. He implements a lot of, words from that culture that I assume are authentic to real life. I don't know for sure if they actually are or not, but it feels very authentic to this culture, and so it implements that makes it feel very authentic. The characters themselves, like the banter, the way they talk to each other, feels very authentic, and also just gives the characters, I think, a lot of charisma, and you always just enjoy seeing them on the page. I feel like, based on these books, at least, John Gwynne's big strengths, at least for me, are the action and the character writing. Like, those are both really, really good in this book and in the first book. As far as anything else that I liked, just the general sense of setting and world building to this as well. Like I said, like the stuff with the building the setting in terms of, the type of language used is really good in this book, in terms of expanding on the mythology and the the magic type stuff, like not necessarily magic type stuff, but like the gods and all these different like beings out there and things like that. Really builds a strong sense of setting, and like I said, just everything about this book just feels really. It feels fantastical, but it also feels very authentic to the kind of culture that he is presenting within this book, which is something I really, really like. Very, very well done. You can tell that John Gwynne really has a passion for that kind of Nordic culture, because it really comes across in this series. As far as things that I didn't like so much about this book, it really comes down mainly to one thing, and it's something that I did praise about this book, and it's something I appreciate about this book. It just didn't quite land for me all the way, which is the heightened scale and scope of this book. Which I like, because I think that's how a series like this should go, and I think that it is done well. It's just not the way that it was done didn't quite work for me. I prefer personally the approach of something like book one, where you pretty much only have three POVs, at least that I can remember. I read this book a couple of years ago, but I think it only had the three main POVs, and I did like that better. It made the book feel a little more focused to me, made it a little bit easier to keep track of characters and plot lines, whereas this adds in a few more characters that are relevant to those three plot lines, but are also kind of doing their own thing, or having their own motives, or their own plot lines going on, or things like that. And even though I appreciate the expansion of that, and that's a thing that fantasy in general does, when it comes to a series, as the series goes on, you tend to get more POVs, more characters contributing to the narrative and things like that. So it makes sense 100%. But to me, it just made it feel a little harder to follow everything. And I'm sure it didn't help that it's been 2 years since I read the first book, but I feel like I remembered it pretty well and things like that. So it just made it a little harder for me to follow. I still enjoyed the book plenty, but that is the one thing that kind of brought it down for me, is I feel like for me and what I enjoyed, especially more so in comparison to book one, the expansion of it just felt like it didn't quite work for me. But that really is the only issue that I had with this book in terms of anything really major at all. One other thing that I actually thought of that I also want to praise about this book, that isn't really about the book itself, but something I really enjoyed, is this book had the story so far section at the beginning, which, like I said, it's been 2 years since I read book one, and I remembered it pretty well, but that's something that needs to become like a thing in every book. Like, seriously, like I wish that every book series did that, because it is like the best thing, especially for people like me who wanted to read the series for 2 years and was never never got around to it. So getting that kind of refresher is very nice, and I wish more series would do that. It seems to be becoming more common, and I hope that it becomes something that like really becomes very common in the future. But anyways, that's pretty much all I got to say about this one. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I had a really good time with it, even though the plot at times did kind of lose me, just because it got quite a bit bigger, both in terms of the amount of POVs, in terms of the scale of the story itself, things like that. It just became a little hard for me to kind of keep track of everything. And like I said, I'm sure it didn't help that it's been so long since I read book one, but I still enjoyed it all the way through. Great action, great characters, great world building, really good prose, like just across the board. This book is done, I think, just as well as book one. So like I said, if you enjoyed book one, I think you will also enjoy book two. And based on these two books, John Gwynne is looking like an author that I'm really going to want to read more of. I really want to read his Faithful and the Fallen series anyway, but especially after reading this book, I'm like, once I finish Bloodsworn, I want to get those books in my hands and read them, because he just seems like such a great author and I want to read more of his stuff. So as far as a rating out of 10 that I'd give The Hunger of the Gods, I think I'd give it like an 8.5 out of 10. It's a really good, really fantastic, just didn't quite make it up to the first book for me, but still really, really excellent, and I had a really good time with it. So that's pretty much it for this review. Let me know in the comments if you have read The Hunger of the Gods, what you thought of it, if you liked it better than book one, if you liked it less, or whatever your thoughts may be, or even like, you know, if it's your favorite in the trilogy, least favorite in the trilogy compared to even the third book, whatever you think about it, let me know in the comments. And I do intend to read book 3 by the end of the year. I don't know exactly when that's going to be, but I'm thinking probably November, December, somewhere around there, just because I have quite a few things on my TBR that I want to get to in like September and October. But once I get all that stuff done, I am planning to get book 3 in towards the end of the year. So be looking forward to that, and I will post my review of that once I read it and all that kind of thing. So that's pretty much it for this one. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.